We are.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock, Monday, July 18th, 2022. I'd like to call the Petersburg Borough meeting into order. If I could, will the clerk please call the roll?
David,
Here.
Mark,
Excused.
Chelsea,
Here.
Bob,
Here.
Jay.
Here.
Jeff,
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, the voluntary pledge of allegiance, please.
Public for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one set of minutes for approval tonight of the July 5th, 2022 regular assembly meeting. If everybody's okay with it, we'll just take a voice. If everybody's in favor of those minutes, I'll say yes.
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
Hearing no dissension here, let's move on. Are there any amendments or an approval, or any amendments, first of all, to tonight's agenda? Okay, hearing none. Would somebody like to move to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. So moved.
Okay, been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on. There are no public hearings tonight. There are no bid awards. We'll move on to persons to be heard related to items on the agenda. Is there anybody, Clerk Thompson, in the queue?
There is not.
Okay, anybody in the audience on items related to tonight's agenda? Hearing none or seeing none, we'll move on to persons to be heard on related to tonight's agenda. And again, Clerk Thompson, is there anybody on the line?
There is not.
Okay. And the same in the conference room. It's pretty bare in this room here for the listeners and out there. And with that, there are no board, commission, committee reports. There's nothing on the consent agenda. And we're down then to report of other officers. We have a report from the Tongass District Ranger, who's new, Vernon Ray Bourne, the new district ranger in Petersburg, is going to provide a report to the assembly. And with that, Ray, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bob. I appreciate the time tonight. And I want to say I'm honored to be here, live and work in this land of Tinklet people, as well as in Petersburg here. I'm very pleased to be here. It's a beautiful place, that's for sure. I really like to be in this area. A couple things about me. I'm a farm boy. I grew up in southeastern Minnesota on the land that my parents had, my grandparents had, my great-grandparents had. And now I also have my sisters there, my nieces, my nephews, and my grandnieces and grandnephews are all there still. So long family tradition on that farmland in southeast Minnesota on a dairy farm. So I learned to get up early and I learned to work late. So habits I haven't lost over time, that's for sure. So I'm married to Marty, my wife of over 20 years. We have 4 children, Matt, Nika, Heather, and Levi. Matt and Heather are in Eastern Washington. They work in the healthcare industry. My son is a transport specialist, moving people to different hospitals and stuff like that. And my daughter, Heather, she actually coordinates the home healthcare in that area. So it's really a fulfilling thing. Our daughter, Nika, is an electrical engineer. She works in the theater in Macau, China, doing underwater electrical work. She's a dive instructor as well as everything else she does there. Our son, Levi, is a computer engineer. He's working for Dish Network in Denver, Colorado. So I have family spread all over. Kind of an interesting dynamic like that. I'm also a retired Army reservist. I retired as a colonel after 35 years, Army Reserve, and Army National Guard, and active duty Army, with lots of experience kind of throughout the world with some of that. But today, I'm here to talk to you and listen to you about 4 topics. You know, the first one's going to be a little bit about Omer Creek Restoration Project. We're going to talk about some timber sales. I have Rob Dickamore here to say expert on timber sales stuff to talk about that a little bit. Talk about trails and cabins. There's a map up there. We'll talk about that briefly. And then I'll kind of close out talking about the facilities consolidation that we're going through right now and get some feedback from everybody. Omer Creek Restoration Project is on the floodplain Omer Creek. We're going on right now. We're getting ready to go into the water and start doing some work and put in some structure to kind of recreate that floodplain and put it back to its normal thing. So that's going really well. And I guess Joe is going to go out there and interview Heath out there sometime later this week. So we'll hear more about that from there. On the timber sales side, and Robert can talk more about that, but we got some small timber sales going on. Mickoff and Coppernoff Islands, trees along the road systems, kind of small sales, looking at high value timber, trying to keep the small sawmills in business and working together with them on that. And that's going pretty well. Joe asked me a question about firewood. Kind of all the dead and down is what's available for firewood. So it's dead and down, have at it, quite frankly, and it's all free. Well, I understand up to 25 cords per person. So anybody that wants to stack 25 cords, have at that too, quite frankly. You know, I've stacked more than 5 or 6 at a time, and that's about my limit. That's all I want to do. Really, the thing we're working on mostly is young growth timber sales, mostly Upper Falls Creek that I signed off on that. I'll sign off on that today. And we'll get that nominated out there for some people to get some young growth timber stuff. Pretty specific of what we're doing, but we're looking at some of that harvest for, again, to keep the mills in business, to keep the economy going a little bit. And then Thomas Bay is being proposed for next year. We'll be working on that. And as we go through these meetings, I'd like to come once a month and give you updates on all those things that you're interested in, kind of keep you informed on that. Any questions on the timber sales that Robert can probably answer better than I can? Okay, and we'll keep talking about it as we go forward, so that'll help a lot. Cabins, we're proposing to relocate some cabins from the little use sites, typically fly in and the movement into roadside areas. And as you see a map on the wall up here, the green ones are the existing cabins, the red ones are the proposed cabins. So we're moving forward with a couple of recommendations pretty quickly here, but the benefit is again, working in partnership, maybe we can do a few more. So something to consider as you look at all of that. When you have time, take a look at that, but we're moving forward pretty quickly and hopefully we'll have something in the works here, maybe by the end of the year, with maybe some actual construction in the next couple of years. So we'll be working on that really hard and paying attention to that as well. And again, support from the past on Ravens Roost. I understand that, you know, the borough supported us a lot in that process and getting that built. It's a wonderful cabin. I hiked up there and back down in one day and I'm like, okay, I probably shouldn't do that, but it was a good exercise, that's for sure. Some stuff on trails. The Ideal Cove contract has been completed with improvements on that trail, so that's more accessible now. People can get in and out of there a lot easier. We're still working on Omer Creek Trail, but that was pretty badly blown down in that windstorm last winter, and I've hiked it a couple times now. And the crews have been out there putting in gravel, cleaning up that trail, making things better. I want to get back out there and take another look at that. So that's in much better shape now than it was when I first hiked it in April, that's for sure. And then the Three Lakes Trail, they're working on Sand Lake and Crane Lake trails right now. I've hiked those trails as well, and Crane Lake Trail is a real challenge. I'll be honest with you. It was more than I expected, quite frankly. There's a lot of down logs out there across the trail that again, the crews are getting out there and trying to work on that as well. On Raven Trail, we have a guide proposing to use more use on that. He's got 200 use days up there right now. He's asked for another 500. We're looking at that going, well, that's probably a little more than we're willing to save for this year, but we'll talk through that with that contractor, you know, more visitors coming up. Generally, they're going up just to that first bench up there. That's that stainless steel bench, real nice, a nice overview there. And they're going back down, mostly coming from the cruise ships, as I understand it. So again, that's a pretty good use. That's a well-maintained trail at that point. So we're going to paying attention to what's going on with that, and we'll continue to work together. Finally, the facilities consolidation. So we've been working on this process for quite a while. The first step was to clean out the nursery and return to university. We're about 95, 98%. I just came from there. There are a couple more things to move, and then we'll be done with that and work with the university to do that. The challenge is, of course, we lost our maintenance shop and we lost our storage facility for lots of storage stuff. So a lot of stuff we had to dispose of. Some went to dump, some went into the burn pile, but most of that is taken care of here. So the kind of the intent is remodel the downtown office and then consolidate most of the personnel into that office, you know, at some point in time in the future. And then the Harris building will be limited staff and maybe some storage, and that's the area out by Scow Bay out there that we're working on. So the main thing is that we need to replace that light maintenance storage and storage facility we lost coming out of the nursery. And the question is where to do that. Can we do it up here at Fram Street, where we've got those two older bricks, 402C and 402B, if you know what those are? We're going to demo those. They're no longer usable. So we need to demo those. And We thought about putting a maintenance facility kind of in that area there, light maintenance and some storage in that area. We've also discussed remodeling the Harris building to do that same sort of thing. And our maintenance person, Paul Latomsky, prefers to be close to on Fram Street because it's easy to get back and forth to the office. But I understand there's some concerns and we need to kind of do that. I need to make the decision next week, so I need some feedback from all of you as to what we're going to do with that. And that's about it. Any questions from me from the council?
Member Tremblay?
First, thanks, welcome.
Thank you.
Forest Service brought my family here, so more the merrier.
Mhm.
I'm really excited about the idea of the monthly report, so I really hope that you do that. And then what's the best way for the public to get in touch with you with this feedback, so that the assembly isn't the only in
The only
between
feedback,
spot, you
yeah.
know? As much fun as it is to collect public testimony, it's,
they
where
can
can we send people?
Yeah, they can call my office at 5900 772 is the area. 5900 is my direct line. They can call me and leave a message. You know, I'm in and out quite a bit, but I definitely will follow up with my messages. So thank you.
Thank you.
Member Miyuchi?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. What's the market for the second growth?
I'll let Robert speak to that. He's the expert.
Well, we do have one mill on the island that has been requesting young growth. So it's kind of that mill is kind of the impetus to get it. They've been doing, we currently have a CE. So for small sales here on the island, it's category exclusion. So they're doing, it's kind of individual trees or small little groups. And it was meant more so for an old growth setting. So we have a couple different small mills here on island that are doing it. And also in Cake, there's a couple small mills that are doing small timber sales for that. And yeah, it's basically with the CE, the purchaser, it is in our, for our forest plan, the land use designations that they can go in. So it's only in the modified landscape, timber, or scenic view sheds. If you know our forest plan, those three land use designations that the timber sales can be in. And then basically we go out, they propose trees, we go out, we look at them, see if there's any reasons why they shouldn't be done. So streams, if there's, so we're following the forest plan, any goshawks or other raptors or anything in the area, buffers, any other buffers that need to be in place for any of the resources, either heritage wise or plants wise. And then if it goes through, it would be put under, well, it goes out for bid for small sales wise. They go out for bid for 2 weeks. They're basically just posted. They're not posted in the newspaper, but they're posted on the board. The people have expressed interest in bids. We send out we mail it out to them, both hard copy mail and email. And then after that, they do the bid opening, and the high bidder will be awarded the bid. So given that, with we can have multiple right now it's the Upper Falls Creek, so there's 2 units in it. We're working on, there's proposed acreages, and we're actually going in and checking them out and starting to do the layout on them to see, and then we'll see how it goes, if they really are interested in bidding on it or not.
Cool, thank you, Robert.
Yep.
Other questions from assembly members?
So
And
you're
final
talking
motion.
about consolidation, thank you. So are you proposing to expand the facility downtown, or is it going to stay the same, or where would staff go?
Yeah, thanks for that question about the facility downtown. All 3 or 4 of the alternatives doesn't change the footprint of the facility downtown. The plan right now is based on what the contractor tells us, based upon the age of the building. Basically, they'll gut the entire building and then completely redo it. So Won't change the footprint, but we'll kind of change the layout within the building. And then once that's done, we'll consolidate, the district staff and the supervisor's office staff that's currently in the Harris building, all into the downtown building. But again, we're going to talk through how best to do that. I think in the current climate of more telework, we're seeing that some of our folks can easily telework from home and are doing a really good job of that. So I think we can do that reasonably, but you got to think through, some of what I call the critical functions. My maintenance crew is critical function, because if they don't have a place to work, they can't maintain anything. We can't keep anything going like that. And we have, of course, our visitor services. We have to be present for people. As part of our job is to be part of the community, so people can visit us. So again, that's kind of a critical function we have in the building and something like that. So things we're working through, but we're kind of in that design of where are we going to generally put these buildings. We're going to do that. My objective is not to lose any more storage space, quite frankly. Again, we're having trouble right now. We have stuff kind of scattered all over around the Fram Street area right now, just kind of stacked in there. And if you've been by the Harris building down there, you'll see there's containers and a couple of Booney barns behind there. And again, stuff's all stashed in there. So we're trying to work through that whole process. But yeah, we're not going to expand the footprint downtown. We may change the footprint at Fram Street. And maybe, I don't think we're going to change the footprint at the Harris building. We may reduce it a little bit. That's kind of one of the discussions with the Harris building. There's some structural concerns with that building we may have to address.
Thank you.
Other questions from members? And I have a couple for you then if they're done. If you look at consolidating some of your sites there, is there any possibility, for instance, in some of the residents and stuff that will become excess, that other residents could be built or other housing could be built on it?
One of my overall objectives in Alaska is always provide housing for my people, quite frankly. And one of the options that's not in any alternatives right now is additional housing for anybody or accessing any housing. We're down to just the bunkhouse and the one ranger house up there at Fram Street right now. So that's all the housing we have. The cost of housing in Alaska is astronomical. In Bethel, where I came from, I successfully changed it from 9 houses to 15 houses there to kind of help the staff out. It took several years, but I think that's a good method, because we bring in a young person coming in to work for us. We give them this salary and they get a choice. They can either have a place to rent or they can have food to eat. Quite frankly, it's challenging to keep young people on board. So figuring out ways to do that's really important. So I'm going to work on that. Again, it takes years to do that, but that's okay. That's what I'm here for.
Thank you. Then one last question, on the maps, I'm glad to see that we're looking at other cabins and the cabin sites and so forth, because that's a legacy here in Southeast. It's well used, well recognized, and I think it's something that really needs to continue, from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, make notes on the map if you want and give me a call and just let me know different thoughts on that. Probably right now, it looks like Blind Slough is probably our primary position right now, because road access easy to get to, and we can maintain it pretty quickly. And it seems to be pretty popular. I kind of like that area too.
Thank you. Member Tremblay.
Yeah, just one final question. We're looking at a map here in the Assembly Chambers. Where can the public see this map? Is it on the Forest Service website? Or is it on?
We will put it on the website.
Okay.
I just created this map, last week for PIA, quite frankly. And my guy said, wow, this is a great idea. Yeah, let's post it.
Yeah, I'd say also I'd recommend sending to KFSK. They tend to do a great job hosting
Okay.
files in a easy to use website, but don't let me sign KFSK up for anything, but they'd be
Perfect.
open to the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Moving on to the mayor's report then. It's pretty short this time. We're seeking letters of interest from citizens who wish to serve the community by filling one of the vacant seats on the following borough boards commissions until October 2022 municipal election. Planning Commission, 2 vacant seats. Park and Rec Advisory Board, 1 vacant seat. Letters of interest should be submitted to Clerk Thompson at the borough offices located at 12 South Nordic Drive, or by sending to P.O. Box 329 Petersburg, AK 99833, or by emailing dthompson@petersburgak.gov. And with that, we'll move on to the manager's report. Mr. Giesbrecht.
Thank you, sir. Our water staff recently performed some general maintenance on the City Creek Dam spillway. Thank them for that. We continue to see some failures of some of our infrastructure in the ground. We're doing some planning meetings to talk about projects for our water distribution and wastewater collection piping. This is especially important as we talk about potentially doing subdivision builds. We want to make sure that any expansion of our services takes into account any services that need to be fixed before we can expand. So it's an important process. Wastewater staff has been servicing cruise ships this year to accept black water on using a repurposed street washing truck. Loads of wastewater are being held to the treatment plant as needed by the visiting ship. So it's continuing to be a popular program. Someday we'd like to be a little, have a dumps a little easier than having to haul it a truckload at a time, but we'll work on that in the future. Blind Slough project on the hydro continues to progress. We have an application for a non-capacity license amendment has been issued to FERC in Washington, D.C. Project plans continue to come together with information being received from the equipment provider, and award for the specialty high pressure valves is in front of you this evening to allow for the issuance of a PO that is literally above my spending. And we'll probably have more of that as we get into the project and start getting some of these specialized equipment in here. Our annual FERC inspection at Crystal Lake Dam went well, with the inspector pleased about the condition of the project. Items of concern are generally minor and easily addressed. Bob Zemke, who is our power plant mechanic, is retiring in the end of July. Over 25 years of service to the department and the borough. He's kept our diesel generators and hydro facility in top condition during his career and has responded to countless power outages in service to the community. Please join us in thanking Bob for his outstanding career and work efforts over the last 25 years. Congratulations on his retirement, and a gathering for his retirement we held in his last week of work, with more information provided later. The summer stream and baby bookworms, the library's youth summer programs, wrapped up on July 10th. We had 135 kids participated in the program, logging over 78,000 minutes of reading and completing 1,423 educational challenges. The area in front of the library, adjacent to the large landscaping bed in the front, has been paved by Bob Olson and his crew. The project was funded by donations to the library. We'll put a few benches and some planters are planned for that area. We'll be adding a fountain bottle filler in the library foyer. And Tara will be out of the office July 20th to August 13th on a well-deserved vacation. So any updates to our website should wait until she gets back. Chase Kirby has accepted a conditional job offer for our open police officer position. He's currently looking for housing opportunities in Petersburg. I believe it's his wife and 4 kids. So we're keeping an eye out for him. Police department is looking into requirements, pricing, and options for the digital live scan fingerprinting. Live scan fingerprinting would be a benefit to the entire Petersburg community. This helps the child care providers as well as Mountain View Manor, and as well as what the police does on a regular basis, and the folks in the harbor who have to get TWIC cards for handling cruise ship visitors. So the chief's looking into it, trying to find what's the best system that will work with those Alaska agencies and federal agencies that can do this and still provide the services that the community needs. And we got a decent plan. We just got to find the exactly right tool and then get it in front of the assembly on the pricing. Reed Brothers has made really good progress on the Public Works yard culvert replacement. Looks like they're going to finish on schedule and within the Fish and Game permit window. As a reminder, we had to do that during a certain window to avoid salmon fry. So we're still clearing debris from the landslide that occurred during the weekend of June 25th and 26th, which resulted in a discharge of blue clay material into Hammer Slough Creek Basin. Slide area has been stabilized and the creek flow is reestablished. We are working with an engineer, DEC, and permitting authorities to develop a plan for permanent repairs. The crew did repair a water main break near the intersection of 3rd and Fram Streets. This is one of the things that led us to taking a hard look at Fram Street. That's an area that we'd like to expand some housing, and we want to make sure that the old AC lines are up to it or have to be replaced. Continue to make good headway on the backlog of building maintenance work orders. At present, Sam and Jim are working to address some longstanding maintenance need at the Clausen Museum. They've been over there for a week or two, kind of trying to catch up things over there. Our lifeguard course scheduled for July 29th and 31st. People must attend all 3 days and the online portion before the first day of the class. If you're interested, please contact Scott Burt at Parks and Rec very soon for the online course voucher. We also have new volleyball net and pads will be arriving this week, and check out our schedule and come join us for some volleyball fun at the gym. Parks and Rec would like to thank Petersburg Rotary for purchasing and installing the new ADA walkway mat at the Sandy Beach Playground, making it more accessible for all mobility needs. Check it out. It's 100% recycled and recyclable. It's UV and rot resistant, life expectancy of 10+ years. It's easy maintenance, can be left out during the winter months, and it's manufactured in the USA. Thank you, Petersburg Rotary. And the Aquatic Center is still expecting some small repairs to finalize our repair project. We will carry out these smaller projects with the least amount of scheduled disruption to the public. And thank you everyone for your patience as we go through that. But the new boilers have been installed. So anyway, that's it unless there's questions.
Okay, questions, Assembly members? Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, we talk about, there's 2 items on here about the City Creek Dam and the Crystal Lake Dam. How often do we get those dams inspected for structural integrity?
Oh, Carl?
For structural integrity?
Well, just integrity in general. I mean,
The staff does quarterly inspections at all the dams that we have. The Crystal Lake Dam gets inspected by the FERC inspector every year. And every 5 years, we have a detailed inspection by a third-party engineer that looks at that dam. And that because it's a federal jurisdiction that oversees the regulations on the Crystal Lake Dam, the effort there is higher. But state takes care of regulating the City Creek Dam and the Cabin Creek Dam, and so those are a little less.
thank you.
Follow-up question?
Not a follow-up, just a different question regarding the digital fingerprinting.
Mhm.
So if we're able to get that online, then people don't have to go to Wrangell to apply for their Tux cards. They can do that here.
That's the hope. We've got a lot of details to work out. Right? Jim, do you want to
Yeah.
chime in? You've done all the hard work on this.
Yeah, so basically, when we were looking at the live scan, this has been talked for quite a while about all this. I mean, the childcare and the assemblies kind of pushed it just a little bit, which has helped us greatly. I actually figured out what machine is accepted by the state of Alaska, and it'll help us out, cut down on some work. We can upload directly to the state. We can also print out cards as well, and they will tell us whether or not they're acceptable right then and there, instead of having to get 3 cards, send them off, and then you're waiting and all of a sudden they're rejected. It'll tell us right then and there if they're acceptable, so that we can use that for all the fingerprinting purposes. But to your specific question, I actually reached out to TSA. I inquired about being a setup location for them, and I filled out all the stuff that they have sent me. They sent me this detailed thing, how we can be partners and work together and dedicate space and all this stuff. I filled out all that information, and I'm just waiting to hear back. They will actually, so long story short, yes, you won't have to go to Wrangell anymore. So we can get those all done here in Petersburg. And then we will also be able to have the community go online where they can schedule their time for fingerprinting. And we can say how many we can, like what day of the week we can do it, and then open up how many people we can do in that time frame. So they will collect the money and they will do all the scheduling online. The only thing we have to do is supply the person there to do the fingerprinting. And that's as far as I'm at right now, besides figuring out how much this is going to cost.
That's great. Thank you.
Other questions by the Assembly members? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. There is no unfinished business tonight. So we'll move on to new business. The first item on there is approval to update Alaska Department of Transportation needs list. Do I have a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second.
It's, with that, what I'd like to do is on this particular item, is take one motion at a time and we'll go through it and then we'll kind of consolidate them at the end, if that's okay with the assembly. So if you want to make changes to them, if you want to make proposals, okay? So I'll open it then for any changes that the assembly would like to make on that list.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, Mayor Stan Gregor.
Thank you, sir. Well, first of all, do you want this to be done by amendment or just by like consolidating ideas? I kind of missed the format. You want to do it on either by amendment or just to propose an idea? What's your play?
Yeah, the manager has proposed taking some items off and adding new items to it. And that's particularly what I was referring to. If the assembly would like to try a different process, that's fine with me.
Oh, that works great. I'll follow up then and say I would like to remove the Wrangell Narrows shuttle terminal, the Petersburg shuttle terminal, the Wrangell Narrows shuttle ferry, and the Kupernoff shuttle ferry terminal. To me, compared to, on the off chance we actually received money for one of those locally, it'd be money that would be much more relevant for some other project. So that's my 2 cents on what I'd like removed.
Is there a second?
Also, second.
Okay, discussion from members? Okay, hearing none, would the clerk call roll on the amendment? To remove those items?
Yes. Chelsea,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Hearing that, it's a full assembly vote to remove those four items, I believe it was, off the list. Are there any other changes that the members would like to make? Member Tremblay?
So just for confirmation, the green is proposed additions that we would need to amend to make on the formal list?
So the green, I'm proposing to add to the needs list.
Okay.
The red, I was proposing to delete
Okay.
from the list.
And if we don't forward motion add them, they will be
Then I'm going to
removed
add,
and
I'm
they
going to
will-
assume that you,
we're passing on them. Okay, so then I would like to,
wait a minute.
Yeah.
Are we talking the same language? I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, Steve's proposing these changes, greener additions, red are out.
Mhm.
So it will, if you approve it as he's proposed, it's as it is.
stays in.
Yes, if you want
Okay.
anything different than what you see, then you make changes.
Great, okay. Then I'll just take a second to be excited about the Fram Street infrastructure and the Frederick Road resurfacing. So I'm just going to be excited about those out loud, but thank you for adding them to the list. And I'll pass on my comments for now and let somebody else speak.
Any other changes proposed by members?
I just have a question to manager. You have as one of the items that you perceive that you'd want to be removed, which is paving from South Metcalf Ferry Terminal to the end of the road and then resurface Scal Bay Loop. Would you like to explain your thinking
yeah,
behind that?
actually, these have been on this
Mhm.
list forever and they were actually been done by DOT.
Well, that was my understanding. So what we're talking about is a zombie SIP list?
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Yeah.
Okay, yes, I understand completely. Yes,
So I was trying to get it up to speed is what it was.
right, right.
And does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay. Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'm just a little confused that the motion was to pass this list in its form, in the form that we have it in front of us. And which includes all the things in green are added to the list and all the things in red are removed from the list. Okay,
Actually, you amended that to only delete the 5 shuttle ferry issues, at least at this point.
So then I'd like to further clean up, just proactively removing and amend the list to remove paving from South Minkoff and resurfacing Sky Bay Loop Road. I guess then I'll make it all encompassing for the rest of the red, improving the drop off at Stemmen Elementary and the boardwalk trail along Frederick Point. So that formalizes the removing of the list, moving items from the list.
Basically, everything listed in red.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Motion, Member Kensington?
Question, the last 2 items, they improved the drop off at Stedman Elementary. That's already been done as well.
Yes, sir.
And the boardwalk has also already been done as well,
Yes.
correct? Okay, so
Yes, sir.
those are more zombie STIP items. Okay,
Don't know why they were there. but-
yes, okay, thank you. Just so everybody listening knows what we're talking about here.
Right, there's been moved and seconded to do it, would clerk please call the roll on that motion?
Yes, and this is to remove all items listed in red on this list. Thomas,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes,
David,
Yes,
Chelsea.
Yes.
Thank you.
any other changes proposed before we go back to the main motion to make the additions? Okay, hearing none, let's go back to the main motion then which would take in all the changes and would allow the manager to put the new items on the list.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. With that, would the clerk please call the roll?
Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes,
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. And then the list now has been updated. With that, I think the manager also has some ideas about this needs list and what he wants to do in the future. Would you just take a minute, Steve, and explain
be happy
where
to.
you plan to go?
This is a list that none of us even knew existed. Obviously had not been reviewed for a very long time. So I've now incorporated it into the capital project process for the borough. So I've got a new spreadsheet that you've seen a copy of that shows, lists an item and then lists what list it's going to be on. So CAPSIS is the legislative grant process. The needs list is Department of Transportation. And then there's the old earmarks, congressionally dedicated directed spending. And so I'll try to put items on this list and then show you where they are, where they show up, what list do they appear on. I'm doing this earlier than we normally do. Normally this is done towards the end of the year. There's a lot of money floating around right now. So I wanted this thing way up to date right now. I didn't want to wait too much longer. And I will bring this back to the assembly for the priority side of this. You'll notice on the far right-hand column, I've put on 15 items, I've given priority numbers to it. That's just me doing it. I expect that to be changed. And that's really the assembly's, what you're gonna have to do. So that'll likely be on an upcoming agenda for you to prioritize, basically choose your top 15. I think 15 is a good number. There's no rhyme or reason to that other than, nobody likes getting 30 or 40 priority items. So I thought 15 was enough to give us some, get in front of everybody. All of these end up on a list and get presented to delegations both here and in Juneau. So even if it's not a priority item, people get to see it. But the priority are the ones that I work extra hard on with the delegation. If I go and talk to them, I bring those up. So we'll do that at a future meeting, or the assembly will. And that's kind of the idea behind it.
Thank you. And I think it's important that we get it updated sooner than later this year with the potential of having funding available. Thank you. With that, I'll move on to the item B, the purchase of high pressure valves for the Blind Sioux Hydroelectric Project. Is there a motion on that project?
So move.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. With that, if I might, would either the manager or utility, Mr. Hagerman, give us a little explanation, at least for the public, of what this is intended to do?
Certainly, I can do that. So, as everyone knows, we've been working steadily on the Blind Slough Hydro refurbishment project. Okay, thank you. We've been working on a refurbishment project for the hydro. One thing that we were very nervous about as we're waiting for the larger equipment to be provided by Jilks Hydro is that there are many other components of the project that normally would be wrapped into a construction contract. However, the lead times for various industries have just really ballooned because of pandemic effects and supply chain issues. And so we have looked at various components in the overall project on the construction end and tried to hedge our best to make sure that those components are going to be in Petersburg when the project starts. So we are proactively trying to order those items, and so that we can get that lead time clock ticking and make sure that those components are in Petersburg when they need to be. So these, the valves that you're looking at tonight are part of a bypass system. Right now, as has been the case for quite a while, and it will be the case after the project is completed, whenever the hydro is down for maintenance or other reasons, there's a bypass system that continues flow to the hatchery. And that system takes water that's anywhere between 550 PSI to 600 PSI, and it reduces the pressure to atmospheric and then allows it to flow to the hatchery. And so the valves on this system are fairly specialized. The specifications are not a run-of-the-mill valve that you find at a normal water and sewer supply shop. And the engineers solicited companies that they know produce the valves that we need. And the B&K valve company provided the lowest quote on these valves. The other outfit was about $40,000 higher than this one. So the engineer is recommending to award the purchase order to B&K valves.
Question from assembly members? Okay, hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, and only because it hasn't been said out loud, and I noticed that I did not put it in the narrative on the agenda, and I usually do. The total amount for the purchase order will be $61,692. Okay, Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, with that, it's approved unanimously to purchase the valves needed in the future here for the Blind Slough project. Next item on the agenda is approval of a letter to Coast Guard regarding a formal lease agreement. Assembly Member Tremblay requests approval of a letter to the Coast Guard to authorize Manager Giesbrecht to pursue a formal lease agreement for housing units to help meet housing needs of first responders and other individuals in Petersburg. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Okay, it's been approved, seconded on it. With that, Member Tremblay, would you like to kind of go through some explanation on what the thought process and what we're trying to do?
Yeah, so this came about through a phone call I received from Chief Kerr. He, at the direction of the manager, had reached out to the local Coast Guard. As we know, we have a new vessel. That vessel has fewer personnel. And so we know that there are homes owned by the Coast Guard currently unoccupied, probably for the foreseeable. And so the idea is we have homes in the community that we know are currently unoccupied. And given the fact that the Coast Guard is here for many reasons, but one of which is including assisting in emergency response, the category of first responders in the community would be natural first steps for forming a formal lease agreement for kind of helping solve immediate housing issues. As we heard in the manager's report, we have people we're trying to hire and move here, and we can't find them places to land when they get here. So So I put a letter together. We are still figuring out exactly where it's being sent, but the good thing about the Coast Guard is there is a clear chain of command. So we're feeling like we're just going to send it up wherever it needs to go. They will sort it out amongst themselves. But in addition to the formal lease agreement, I did take it upon myself to include a chapter about how a reminder that first responders include volunteer, or it includes a category of firefighters and EMS, and 99% of those folks are volunteers in our community who do other jobs. And so opening up the door to considering if they would sell those properties in the future, that would potentially free up more real estate in the community. So the immediate thing is the formal lease agreement. I can't help but push a little bit and try to encourage thinking about beyond that. So that's the overall letter. I'm open to amendments. I threw it to both the manager and to Chief Kerr to look at as well. Clerk Thompson helped me as always with putting it together in a more fancy language. So Chief Kerr, did I miss anything? Was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, we found out that when the trooper was looking for housing, we found out that there's a caveat for first responders in their housing. In their rules, there's a caveat for first responders. And so that was what got this going. I know when we were interviewing for Sandy's position, the huge concern was housing, where they were going to be put. I mean, we put all of our heads together trying to find housing, and with this being available, we figured it would help with recruitment so we can say, yes, we have housing available. And so we're pushing it where it needs to be pushed. It was, I have Sergeant Harris. He was in the Coast Guard, so it's great that he knows the inner workings of it. And it got denied here locally, but we knew that was going to happen. So we have to push it up their chain of command until it reaches the right decision makers. And as far as who it's available to or who they say can rent or whatever, that's on them. It's just we're opening up the dialogue with them for it.
Thank you. Member Kensinger?
It's a good temporary fix, but I'm somewhat reluctant doing this because we're trying to encourage the Coast Guard to locate a new buoy tender here, which would substantially increase their housing needs. And one of the selling points to that was that we have available land here that they could stand up more housing on. So my concern would be this would be a very short-term solution because I'd really rather see another 25 people potentially be located here in town. That process is ongoing right now. Actually, one of the engineers that was a facility coordinator for the Coast Guard was here several weeks ago, and they looked at Scow Bay, and she's quite familiar with the housing situation here. But because 10 years ago she was rehabbed the housing. The Coast Guard has very interesting processes, but I would support this if we put a timeline on it, like a couple of years, because they're going to have to start a process here pretty quickly if they do plan on putting that buoy tender here in town. Like right now, the Elderberry has a crew, and don't quote me, I could be wrong on this, 6 to 7 people, whereas a new buoy tender, they don't have the exact crew numbers, but it's up to 25 people. So that's going to create an even larger demand on housing here in town. And the Coast Guard is going to be looking for housing or wanting to construct housing. So I think this would be a very temporary Band-Aid solution to the larger problem that we're trying to deal with that we're going to talk about later in the evening. So I'd support this, but I'd put a caveat on it. I'll make an amendment that we're just looking for a short term, let's say a time horizon of 2 years on this. And, so if they had excess housing, we would obligate it for no more than 2 years.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second them.
Okay, for discussion. Member Tremblay?
I would just point out the goal of this letter is to simply open formal negotiations. So all of those kinds of things would basically get worked out through the process of negotiation and create formal dialogue. So I'm not sure adding formal timeline. We just want this to get to somebody who will read it and respond affirmatively in the next couple of weeks. I'm well aware that a lot of stuff can change in a long period of time, but it doesn't seem necessary to me to put a formal piece on it because we're talking hypotheticals. So I'm just interested in doing something for the here and now and getting the conversation going. But I'm interested in what other people have to say.
Member Feinwald?
Yeah, I think I understand where Member Kanzinger is coming from here, but like Member Tremblay says, you know, we're talking about lease agreements and they're probably going to have some kind of time horizon on them regardless, and that'll be worked out at the time of, you know, if we do ever get to that point. You know, I guess I'm kind of curious what this property is, or what we're actually talking about here, and you know, but beyond that, I don't see any reason not to do this. I don't see why it would hurt, and you know, like Member Kensinger says, we are trying to attract, you know, additional Coast Guard personnel, but I think that's going to require substantial, you know, investment in housing on the Coast Guard's part anyway. And there's, you know, I don't think we're really talking about, again, and maybe you can clear some of this up, Chelsea. I don't know how many units are we talking about here? Is this, are there just houses sitting unused right now, or are they apartments or?
Houses, yes,
Yeah.
I believe 8. Chief Kerr?
I'm not exactly sure on the actual units. I know there's quite a few of the houses and apartments as well. It's both, but this thing was never intended to be a long-term type thing. This was like a case by case, like we offer, say you guys were to do this and we had the approval through the Coast Guard to do it. The intent would be, as far as we were thinking, as far as like if Sandy's position was filled and be like, okay, we have housing secured for this long. And we all know once you get here, it's a whole lot easier to find housing. So this thing was never meant to be long-term. And it was, the thought was to get them here, have them a secured place for a period of time, which wouldn't be maybe 6 months or so, a year tops. I wouldn't even think a year, because I think most of the time, once you get someone here, we can normally find them housing within that first year, no problem.
Member
Mr.
Stan
Mayor?
Drager?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll be voting no on the amendment for reasons that Chelsea and Chief Kerr just said. This is really, in my mind, just an opening salvo to get this ball rolling and see where it goes. And negotiations will play out wherever they do. So I'll be voting no on the amendment, but I will definitely be voting yes on the main motion, because I'm really glad this is on the agenda tonight. And anything we can do to help people move here without the stress of, you know, housing security is a win for our community. That's all. Thanks.
Other thoughts before I? No other comments? Would the clerk please call the roll on the motion? It's,
On the amendment,
yes.
Thomas,
Oh, no.
Jay,
No.
Jeff,
No.
Bob,
No.
David,
Yes.
Chelsea.
No.
Thank you.
The amendment fails. I think it's 5-1. And now we have the main, to approve the letter. Would clerk call the roll to approve that letter?
Jay,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Thank you.
Approval of the Mountain View Manor. The letter is approved to go forward with all members voting in favor of it. Next item on there is approval of Mountain View Manor Director hire. Manager Griesbeck recommends the hire of Derek Casey to fill the Mountain View Manor Director position at an annual salary of $80,000. Do I have a motion to approve the hire?
So move.
Second.
Okay. Been moved by member Tremblay and second by member Mucci. With that, are there questions? And with that, I guess I would ask first the manager to give kind of a brief overview of the individual and thought process here. what do you?
Thank you. Mr. Casey is actually a Petersburg graduate and grew up here and has not been back for 20 years until we brought him back here for this interview. His first part of his career was 14 years working for Walmart as an assistant manager for one of their big stores. He left there and went to work in the assisted living world and currently works in a facility that handles primarily Alzheimer and the other word, dementia patients. So it's a lockdown facility. He's in charge of, he's the director of food services for them, but also works on the floor. And, you know, kind of like Sheilyn has had to do for years, you do a little bit of everything. So he's been, came with sterling recommendations from his current boss and absolutely, you know, came alive when getting into that environment and asking Sheilyn questions. He's been working very closely with her. We included several members of the hospital staff in the interview team, and they all liked him and recommended that he be offered this position. I agree. He's really excited about coming back to Petersburg. He's got 2 boys that may or may not, depends on custody agreements, but he got a chance to see them. They were up here visiting his mom and stepdad while he was here doing the interview process. So I think it's a kind of a great finding a Petersburg person that wants to come back, and she definitely feels a need. So I think he'll do a good job for us.
Any questions for the manager? Member Mucci?
Thank you. When would this person start?
He gave a month notice and he told us in advance that he would, that's what he'd feel comfortable doing. So and then giving him a couple weeks to move, we will see him the end of August.
More question, if I may, is, and he's been briefed on the negotiations and
Yes.
talk with Mountain View Manor?
Yeah.
and how it
Absolutely made
also-
sure that was right up front, that he knew that we were in the process of having discussions with the hospital. And he understands and understands why that makes some sense.
Great, thank you.
Other questions for the manager? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll to hire Derek Casey to fill the Mountain View Managing Director position?
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Thomas. Thank you.
Motion to approve the director goes forward with 6 in favor. With that, we'll move on. There's communications in the package that were received since June 30th, 2022, and I'll not read those. But I'll move on to assembly discussion items. And the first item under there is Housing Task Force. Assembly Member Mucci requested this discussion item. And with that, Member Mucci, would you like to give some explanation?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. As we all know, and we've talked about it several times here, we are in a housing crisis here in Petersburg, and we're going about trying to sort out how we can, alleviate the housing shortage in Petersburg. And I'm trying to figure out if the borough can do more. I know the borough is doing a lot. Staff is doing a lot to help us out to get this. But I've been involved in a couple of meetings with the early child care education task force, and you have a bunch of people involved in it who are passionate about childcare in Petersburg and who are experts in childcare in Petersburg. And over the last couple of months, I've had an opportunity to meet with contractors, builders, engineers, and developers in Petersburg who are excited about the airport subdivision and on the XL Street, Fram Street subdivision. And I just get the sense from them that they would like to do more. And I don't want to task city staff with doing more, but I think, Steve's involved with it, with the early child care task force. And I put it out there because I know Chelsea's working on some housing issues, obviously with that letter that we just passed. But I just wanted to get the feeling from the assembly if they were interested in expanding this housing thing a little more so that we could put a call out to the community to see if people were interested in sitting on a housing task force to kind of look at different solutions to maybe if it's additional ADUs that we talk about, or just a better way of understanding the problem and understanding maybe some of the short-term or long-term solutions to about making the housing situation here in Petersburg a little bit better. I mean, we all know people who are looking for houses in Petersburg. We're looking for builders in Petersburg. And the airport subdivision, if that goes through, those aren't going to be affordable for entry-level folks. We're missing that component. And I know it takes a while for the housing problem to get fixed and addressed, and I want to know if there's any will of the assembly to look into this further. I can flesh this thing out, but before I do that, I wanted to know if the assembly was interested in it so that we can maybe talk about it some more at the next meeting, and maybe I'll have some more definitive information for you. But just wanted to get some dialogue here at the assembly. So that's what I was thinking. So thank you.
Member Kensinger?
Yeah, no, I agree. That's one of the biggest problems we have. It feeds into so many other things that we're having issues with here in town. And I think I'd like to talk about it some more. And I think another appropriate group that should enter in this discussion is planning and zoning. I know when I was on planning and zoning a few years ago, we looked at changing zoning requirements for mother-in-law apartments or whatever you want to call them, or additional units, and also some other discussions about areas that could be used for not a trailer park, but manufactured homes. So I think that's also in their bailiwick. So I think if we do this, we should partner with planning and zoning on this if we do this, because they actually have looked at this quite a bit in the past, and Liz has quite a bit of background on it.
Member Tremblay?
Thank you. I've been having, I guess it's bi-monthly conversations with representatives from social service groups, community members, borough officials on the topic of housing. And in the meeting most recently, something that came up is, as we know, it's a big issue. We need housing, for the professional with 5 children to the person coming up out of homelessness by themselves, everywhere in between. And so it does make the conversation very difficult to grab onto. And so something that was pointed out that we could do that would help us create more concrete action steps is hiring a contractor to do a housing needs assessment plan. And that is something that would give us tangible, actionable, here's what you have, here's what you don't. And so that could help us put together, because I'm in the childcare task force, for example, we have very tangible things we're trying to accomplish. And even with all these brains and with this time, we're still going to come out of it with bigger goals than we will be able to have achieved within a year. And that's kind of where the housing conversation is still right now. And so I'm interested in moving all the chess pieces wherever you can and finding as many tangibles to grab onto. And so to me, this housing plan, it needs to be done when you have the will to do something with it, is how I understand it, because it does become a tool that, we have this, there's some information in the comprehensive plan that's on the borough website, and I'm looking up when, so many pages, it's 150 pages long. So excuse me while I scroll from page 90-ish all the way to the top. When it came out was 2016. And so even the difference in the community between 2016 and now is substantial. And so I would be worried about doing something like that plan if we aren't interested in moving something forward right away. This is probably pretty good atmosphere of a time to be talking infrastructure and housing and plans. The KFSK, it's a regional news story about the problem in Southeast, Coastal Alaska news story that annual survey says out of 440 businesses, the lack of workforce housing is a huge barrier across the region. So yeah, it's a problem. I would like to see tangible steps forward. In the conversations I'm having, it's like a kraken that is just, how do you actually contain it within a conversation? So yes, again, let's just keep talking about it up here. And I'm enjoying that we have been receiving letters and that letters have been going into the paper about what they would like to see. Anyone interested in joining should join the conversation, but I think we just need the tangibles identified before we form anything, because that's already helping me in the childhood task force, and we need as many of those as possible before bringing all those brains together. We need to know what it's going to be doing.
Member Stanton Gregor?
Thank you. Yeah, short answer, Jeff. Great idea. The more minds and interested and invested parties we get on this, the better. Yeah, so let's get it rolling. I'm in.
Member Fine-Walsh?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think everybody agrees this is a really important issue for our community. And as much as I enjoy talking about this, I want to see some more action. I feel like, why don't we just elect ourselves as a task force? I mean, that's what we were elected for. Let's just sit down. We can have a work session. I think getting planning and zoning involved is a great idea. And I mean, in theory, could we not just, have our work session? Kind of, we all know. I mean, member Tremblay's been meeting with people for several months at this point and has a ton of great ideas. And is kind of, I think, already spoken with a lot of the people, Jeff, that you're considering getting involved in a task force. So I feel like we kind of have the tools at this point to sit down and put together a bunch of proposals or ideas. And then it's kind of up to us to just bring those to assembly and vote them up or down. Like, I mean, I think we could put together 5 ideas and bang, 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 see what happens. I feel like that would yield results, a little bit faster. And granted, we can't dive right in. There are things kind of ongoing as the manager will, I'm sure, agree with. We kind of want to see how things pan out before we jump into, the best way to solve the housing crisis in Petersburg. But I don't see why we can't, schedule a work session as opposed to, creating a task force a little bit down the road, make sure planning and zoning is happy to be involved, and then kind of do our homework and show up at that session, with concrete proposals and see, first of all, what planning and zoning thinks is feasible, and also what we, think is going to be feasible come voting time. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Kensington?
Yeah, I concur with Tom, and I encourage everybody to take a look at the comprehensive plan. I mean, we really haven't done much of anything in the comprehensive plan, and if anything, the problem has gotten a lot worse than better from 2016. So if we just started implementing some of the recommendations in that comprehensive plan, that's a good starting point, but everybody should take a look at that first.
Other thoughts, Member Mucci?
Of course, I do. Of course I do. I would be happy to have a work session. That would, I think, be the first step. I'd like us to I know Member Tremblay's doing a lot of work, but I'd like to bring it all together so we know what's going on. And a work session, we could specifically invite members of planning and zoning and members of the builders, engineers, and developers that I've been chatting with, and just have them, brainstorm some of the problems that they see and some of the solutions that they see. I mean, one of the person that I talked to who has a lot of rentals in town would like to see more rentals in town. And I think there's brain power in Petersburg to at least look at the problem and come up with some ideas. And yeah, we can have it as an action item at the next meeting for maybe a work session in August.
Okay, Member Tremblay?
Yeah, just one final contribution. I would hope that our list for this includes folks from the social service connection point, just because we do have people sleeping outside or on the margins of sleeping outside. And from what I'm hearing, those problems are getting more difficult, not easier, as inflation and changes to availability of benefits happen in our community. So that's been part of the really difficult thing of this topic. For us, it's long-term, big thinking, all this stuff, but for a lot of people, it's how are they making rent next month? And so just keeping that sense of urgency with it, I think is important too. So thank you.
Other thoughts? Hearing none. The only thing I'd like to see, and I agree with everything that's said, and I agree with Member Tremblay, I'd like, we could expand this kind of like a rubber band. It's getting way big. We're about due to snap that rubber band, in my opinion. So I think you need to define specifically what you want to address at that work session. It needs to be focused, in my opinion. And so we can look forward with you putting it on the agenda next time for an action item with a kind of a focus on it, if you would.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I can work with Debbie to help me focus on it. I think, you know, for me, it's gonna be housing in general in Petersburg, but affordable housing. I mean, how are we gonna get housing put together for people who can't afford $400,000 or $300,000 for a house? Entry-level houses, people who are working, you know, families are working 2 jobs to make ends meet. You know, both parents are working and whatever. And there's like, remember Kensinger was talking about the manufactured home. There's probably a need for that, you know, high quality manufactured homes. And I think there are some builders in town who have looked at that, but I think they need some community buy-in. And yeah, I'll put something together for the next meeting. Be happy to. And I think it would be good if members had folks that they'd like to include on the list to invite. I think we should bring that at that meeting and make it happen in August. Yeah, I think it's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me move on to the next item is on item B is borough-wide abandoned vehicles. And I know that Member Kensinger and I've had some conversations related to that item. Member Kensinger, if you'd like to discuss that a little bit.
Yes, this kind of came out of a discussion we had with Steve, and I'm going to defer to him on this. It's a problem in town. There's a lot of vehicles that are on the streets. I know come wintertime, I like to see a lot of these things gone and they just stay there and snow gets mounted around them. It's a pain for everybody. So this just isn't an outside of the borough issue. It's as much inside the borough. And I think what we need to do is we need to get procedures established in town on where we can take these vehicles. And I'll turn it over to the borough manager and ask him to illuminate us on his thoughts.
Sure. As we discussed, some of the problems with abandoned cars is it's a paperwork process to make sure that we're not hauling someone's car off that we shouldn't be. And we are limited in some capacity right now by the size of our impound yard. And what we have to do, and we don't really have a great handle on all that. So after that meeting, I've asked a couple of my department heads who have involved in this, we're going to get together and kind of talk about, you know, how do we streamline our own policies? How do we make the impound yard that we have more usable so we don't get in trouble? And, you know, how does that turn into, do we need extra equipment? I mean, if the borough is going to go on a big effort to, you know, haul off abandoned cars, one of the things we've been having some conversations with PIA, and they want to help out in this area and have actually moved farther ahead than the borough has even. So we'll get them back involved in this conversation. And it's just a combination of you know, impounding or destroying vehicles. You know, many people have abandoned cars. They're not really abandoned. They just don't know what to do with them or can't afford to do something with them. So it's a little bit of everything. And we'll put some more emphasis on it. Outside of service area 1, it's a little more difficult just because of jurisdictional issues, but you know, we can work with the troopers on that. And you know, we'll just start working through, you know, what we can do and how do we do it more efficiently than we're doing it right now. You know, we crush cars really well. And I mean, I know it sounds silly, but that's the easy part. It's the making sure that we're not crushing the wrong car that's a little harder. Yeah. You know, anyway, but I think we've got an opportunity here. You know, we'll talk about it and just try to figure out how do we do this in a way that you know, we can get the paperwork done appropriately and we can give people maybe some opportunities to get rid of vehicles they would love to get rid of, and work with PIA and that's where they're headed. So anyway.
Yeah, for the public understanding, the process, if you would, manager, that we have to go through.
Wow.
just for-
Yeah, so if somebody brings us a car and says, this is my car, and they have the license and registration, and I'd like it to go away, that's actually pretty easy. You know, there's some issues with prepping the car and things like that that we're working through. But it's these cars that don't have an owner. I mean, we can research and we find out, you know, Steve owns that car. And we call Steve and he goes, I don't know, I sold that to Jeff, you know, 5 years ago. And so you end up in this loop of trying to figure out who the heck actually really owns it. And there's a notification process that we have to go through before we can legally destroy the car. And that can take some time. You got to be able to find addresses for people. If you can't track them down, you have to run ads in the newspaper for a certain period of time. And when you get all done with all that, then you can get permission to turn it from an impounded car to a car that you can destroy, which we have room for. The challenge with impounding a vehicle is that we're responsible for it. So it has to be in a secure location. We have to have cameras on it. We have to take an inventory of what's on and off the car. We have to take pictures because while that car is in our custody, we're responsible for it. So if, you know, the police or Public Works or somebody, if we have them take a car and impound it, let's say somebody's parked in front of a fire hydrant, we, you know, ticket it and no one ever shows up, and we impound that vehicle. We have to hold on to that vehicle until that process is completed. And that's what it's a paperwork process. I mean, Jim can speak to it maybe better than I can, but it's a very long, involved process. Things have to happen at the right time where you have to start over again. And, you know, I mean, the police department handles a lot of that. They don't have very much on the way of admin support. And this has not been a top priority for them for obvious reasons. But it's something we're gonna have to pay attention to. So.
Chief Kerr, you
Yeah.
obviously want to add. Go ahead.
Say anything wrong?
No, our current impound lot is pretty small. It's narrow. It's got one gate. It makes it hard. So it seems like it's like the purge. We'll purge that thing, and then I get the harbor calling. I get Public Works. I get everyone's like, "Oh, hey, we know it's empty. Let's fill it back up." And so then it gets filled back up in no time. One of the things we've been doing for the past couple of years to cut down on these abandoned vehicles is as soon as we get them, we have to keep them we have to hold them for 30 days. I believe it's 30 days. Then we have to send certified letters. Most of the time we can strike a deal if there's something Chris wants done, some vehicle moved. A lot of times I can strike a deal with them to, hey, if you sign it over to the borough, we'll just get rid of it type thing. That normally works out pretty well on certain things that benefit us and them. On the current ones, like I said, we do the 30 days, we send out the letters. You saw in the past, I believe last month, we had an ad going for 3 consecutive weeks because some of the owners were dead, I believe. And so we have to advertise in the local paper. If someone has a vested interest in it, we have to do all that stuff. Then we get the paper, then we can apply for the paperwork to make it ours. And then once it's ours, we do not let that thing go back out to the public. Obviously, if something's worth a lot of money or there's a lot of benefit to it through the borough, then that's fine. But most of the stuff we get is junk. And so when it goes up to the baler, it does not leave the baler. It can leave in pieces if someone needs to pay the scrap fee to get pieces off of it. But we have refused to let people take whole vehicles like they used to because it cost me $250, I believe, to tow a vehicle up there. And then whatever the processing fee is. And then after that, if someone buys it for $15 and gets it back out, then it costs me a whole lot more. So that's why we don't let them leave that place anymore. So when they're up there, they're up there. And I think to make the process better, obviously staffing, as our staffing gets up, it'll be a whole lot easier for us. Right now, as soon as we can get over there, I believe we were cut off for a little while. I haven't been up there for a while. They have all the stuff going on up there. Once that's done, we can actually empty out that place. We have a whole list of that. That place will be about empty because we have a bunch of vehicles that we already have ownership of, and now we just need to get rid of.
What Jim's talking is the impound yards up at Public Works where we have the culvert project and the landslide going on at the same time. So we have not wanted to get in the way of those folks to do work on the impound.
Thank you. Other member Councilor?
Yes, my observation is that some of these cars probably don't need to make a trip to the impound yard and then up to the dump. You could explore the possibility of some of the special vehicles, just putting them in an impound yard up at the dump, so it facilitates the crushing of it. So I guess what I'd like to see if you guys can come with if there's any equipment that you need, if there's any procedures that you need to have us vote on, just keep us updated on what this is so we can deal with this issue.
We will. I mean, we're gonna meet and try to start talking through it. And as Jim said, as his staffing gets up in dispatch, we'll have a little more help in there. But it's not on Jim 100% either. We have to make sure that we're doing the paperwork at the right time, that we have stuff. The harbor will be at that meeting as well, because it's not totally out of line for us to occasionally have to impound boats that have to be destroyed. And that becomes a huge job for Chris, you know, because you got Public Works up there trying to destroy or store a boat. And that's happened. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this issue. We just have to make sure that we do it legally and that we don't destroy something we're not supposed to. So, anyway.
Thank you. With that, unless there's other, oh, go ahead, Jim, go ahead.
I have an idea. Assemblymember Kinzinger was talking about maybe a program or something. What about doing a discounted rate for abandoned vehicles? I don't know, Chris would have to talk to that, but I mean, whatever the scrap fee is or how they do the fluids and stuff. But I bet if we offered some sort of a discount for a certain period of time for abandoned vehicles or people's vehicles, it seems like a lot of people, the monetary aspect is what makes a lot of the vehicles sit there. So if the borough was to offer some sort of incentive for that where they sign the vehicle over, I guarantee you'd probably see a lot more vehicles heading off to the dump. I think if the assembly was to do something like that, that'd be an excellent idea.
Well, and to jump in,
Go ahead.
that's actually the conversation that Chris and I have been having with a PIA. They're actually considering a program like that. So something that we're going to talk about is
Yeah.
we don't know the extent of it yet, and it's still at the early stages. But Chris and I met with PIA's attorney and Chad to talk through some of this as far as what they can do. And they're seriously working on a program that's exactly like Jim talked about, being able to help people not only get the car moved, but process it so Chris's folks aren't left with fluids and stuff that they have to deal with.
Okay.
So we'll see how that turns out.
Thank you, Manager. Well, yeah, we'll look forward to seeing some follow-up on some point. With that, Assembly member comments. Seeing nobody with hands up, I'll move on to recognitions. Any Assembly members have recognitions to make today? Okay, Member Tremblay?
Thank you. I'm just really excited about how many kids participated in the library program. So thank you to the library staff and all the volunteers and the donors who give out the prizes. It's fun to keep the kids engaged. It's easier on the sunny days, and they definitely help on the not sunny days. So thank you to everyone involved.
Any other comments? With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
With that, we're adjourned for the night.